Welcome to Nurturing Our Roots from the Journey from Slavery to Freedom live Zoom session with Antoinette and Karran. We're live every Tuesday at 7 o'clock Central Standard Time. The talk show where ordinary people with extraordinary family stories can be heard. If you have a family story and would like to share it with us, please contact us at nurturingourroots@gmail.com. I am Antoinette, and I'm turning it over to my co-host, Karran. Hi, Karran. How are you?
Hi, Antoinette. I'm wonderful. How are you?
I'm doing fine on this beautiful day. So, Carrie, you know what I have to do right now,
huh? Yeah.
I have to disappear for a minute, but I just want everybody to know, welcome to the show, and we are excited to have you all join us.
Yes, and thank you so much, Antoinette. And tonight we'd like to welcome Divine Bailey Nichols with the Louisiana chapter of the African-American Historical and Genealogical Society. Welcome, Divine.
Thank you for having me.
We're looking forward to you sharing with us a little bit about the African-American Genealogy and Historical Society. And if you could tell us a little bit about what you guys do, how long have you been operating, and just kind of get us kicked off about learning about the Louisiana chapter.
Yes, I'm going to share my screen right now and just share about our chapter, who has been really, we actually will be a year starting this year of our work in Louisiana. So one moment. Okay, awesome.
I'm glad to see that we have a chapter here. Every year I would go to various conferences and I would go to the exhibit hall and they would say, no, we don't have a chapter yet. We don't have a chapter yet. So I am so glad we now have a chapter. I will soon be joining.
Yes, and I'm going to also have the information here on how to join. Getting a chapter with the Afro-American Historical and Genealogical Society is not easy. So we have, I tell people all the time, and we've been telling folks, we have genealogists here, of course. We have historians here that have been in the state, but forming it and getting us organized really was a love effort of some of our charter members. And before I talk, I always have to give thanks to my elders and those who have passed on, giving thanks to my grandmother and my mother. We just had a recent elder, my husband's grandmother, Mama Dear, passed, and she's from Scotlandville, Baton Rouge, in a little pink beret hat, and she passed at the age of 95 just 2 days ago. And we just want to give thanks and honor these beautiful people that without them, I would not be able to do this work, and who have lit the fire in me, whether they were physical family or people that just inspired me, women that inspired me to do this work that I did not know. So I always want to give thanks before I move forward.
And our deepest condolences to you and your family.
Thank you so much. So I want to move to talk about the Louisiana Afro-American Historical and Genealogical Society. We started off with a good, strong 17 charter members to kick off our the Louisiana chapter. We received our official welcome April 14th. Last year, so right in the midst of COVID, we received our official charter for the state of Louisiana. We will be coming on to 1 year this month, and our charter members range from everywhere from Baton Rouge, New Orleans, Shreveport, Gretna, Ruston, and we also have charter members that's from Texas and California. And if you can see, I just have a few of our people who are actually pictured here, and want to make sure that I talk about our awesome executive board, Yael Gordon, who's our president, Gaynell Banks Brady is our vice president. I hold the office of historian. Then we have Ms. Bowers as parliamentarian. We have Ms. Watson is raising the fundraising chairperson, and Trinicia Lockhart Mims for chaplain. Also, because everybody was not pictured in time, we have Matthew Ware, who's our treasurer, our financial secretary, Ms. Savannah. And so we round out to 17 members who have specialties and concentrations and everything that deals with Black history in the state, whether that be the antebellum and postbellum history of enslaved Africans, Creoles, free people of color, and African Americans who really make Louisiana what it is today. And our hopes and vision is to continue to nurture the African American family research. In these days and times, especially when folks are getting on the internet, going to Ancestry, going to Family Search, we want to be able to give them the tools, especially for the family researcher, to continue to do that work. And also, we have an aim to build a sustainable database of individuals who provide scholarly assistance throughout the state. And this wording comes from our president, Yael Gordon. And then it has the information right here for those who want to join. Please email us at aahgsla@gmail.com. That's aahgsla@gmail.com. Being that it is COVID, we have not had any in-person events, but we do have free web series events that started in February. We had Dr. Antoinette Karran, who was our opening speaker in February, and then our next speaker is Teresa Vega, which is going to be April 16th, and she's going to be talking about her work and research dealing with Puerto Rico and a book that she has coming out. So these are Zoom meetings, and it's going to be virtual, and you can also email us at that same email so you're on the list to know to register for these upcoming Zoom meetings. And my work really now dealing with the society is one, dealing with the history of our moves that we're making right now during this season of COVID while I have this this tenure, but also my specialty work outside the family. I call myself like an intermediate to an intermediate genealogist that I do with my family. But my main work, that's my passion work, is dealing with Black healing and Black midwifery. So I was so really humbled and honored when Miss Antoinette asked, well, come on the show, tell us a bit about the society, the African American Historical and Genealogical Society, and tell us about this work you're doing with Black midwifery in the history of Black midwives. And it's so important because when we think about genealogy and we think about the history of families, all of us have to be born. Okay. And who are those people? We know usually our mom was there, our dad was there, but there were some support people, especially when we start looking in for those of us that are looking for family members past, the 1870 and 1880, there were midwives, those were catchers. Okay. And so just to share for those who may not know who is a midwife or what is a midwife. Midwife comes from an old word breakdown of two words, mid meaning with, wife meaning woman. So at its basis, it means with woman. Midwives pride themselves on women-centered care, family-centered care, and individualized care for patients and their families. Midwives are specialists in the normal process of pregnancy, birth, and the postpartum period. In the state of Louisiana, and in many states, there are two certified types of midwives: the certified professional midwife, who generally does out of hospital birth, and the certified nurse midwife, where you see in the hospitals. Now, these are midwives who accomplish their RN, and then they specialize in midwifery. And a certified professional midwife does train, whether that is going through school or through apprenticeship route, to do out of hospital birth, whether that's in a birth center or home birth. And then we have traditional midwives, which the traditional midwives set the foundation. Without traditional midwives, those that before there were any type of licensure or certification for those who caught our babies, they did this work, and everything else came after them. Nurse midwifery came after the real pushing out of our traditional midwives. And as Black folk, as African-American people throughout the South and really throughout this country, we owe quite a lot to the Southern traditional Black midwife. And a lot of times we are not thinking about that said history. We're at a time now, especially in Louisiana, but in all other states, where our babies and our women are dying due to very high infant mortality rates, very high maternal mortality rates, meaning the rate in which death is happening and occurring after childbirth. And they used to put that on the midwife. They said the midwife was dirty, superstitious, and backwards. But now, at a time where generally all our families are going and having their babies in the hospital, what's causing these deaths of our mothers and babies? And I would pose that is dealing with the racism that's happening in the medical system, and also dealing with the breakdown of our culture. And I generally like to give a general timeline of just how Black folk interaction with this country, right? What would become the United States. We have our life in Africa. We also have in 1526, enslaved Africans were part of a Spanish outpost that would become what we now know today as South Carolina. Then we have the 1619 colony of Jamestown in Virginia. The importation of African slaves is supposed to end in 1808. And I say that because we know we have documentation that there were one or two ships that did come in after 1808. We have the Civil War that ends in around 1865, Reconstruction, and Jim Crow. The reason why I break all these things down is that birthing and midwifery doesn't exist in a vacuum. During this entire time, women were having babies. Who were catching them? How were we tending to ourselves? What traditions and what history did we have during them times of how we tended to ourselves that we can bring forth today to help save our families and assist our families in having better birth outcomes? So a lot of my research go into the history of the Black midwife in the South, the plants and the herbs that Black midwives used and the healers used, and you know how some of us in Southwest Louisiana, our treaters use. We know that many catchers was treaters, but not all treaters was catchers. And so this herbalism, this Black folk herbalism and healing work, because our Black midwives wore many hats. They didn't just catch babies, right? They were counselors. They dealt with spiritual issues. They would deal with if your children were sick, if the elders were sick. So these were really our doctors of the community. Okay, so you'll hear terms like midwife that is still used today, but granny midwife, or the grannies that were used to describe traditional Black midwives. Quiet as kept, they were well respected in their communities, right? So when we see this dichotomy of Black midwives at that time being in the past, being well respected in their community, and now we have today where if you tell somebody you having an out of hospital birth or you having a midwife, they look at you like, what's that, right? So it's like this gap where the history and tradition was interrupted and everybody just went to the hospital. But not only did they just our people go to the hospital, we forgot about our tradition. So midwives that were trained under the Shepherd-Towner Act and later a funding of the Social Security Act served as educators to expectant mothers and community residents in African American communities throughout the South. So I need to say here about the Shepherd-Towner Act. Infant mortality and maternal mortality is not new in this country, but at the time that act was implemented, they said that it was due to these dirty, backwards, superstitious midwives. Okay, they didn't say, you know, lack of water, rural conditions, not because of slavery and the stress that comes out of that, or coming out from slavery and dealing with racism and Jim Crow. They didn't blame it on that. So what we have is allopathic medicine, obstetricians saying, well, these women should not be doing this work, working with these families. We should be doing it. But we know historically, they didn't even want to work with our communities. So they had to find a way to phase it out. So you have the Shepherd-Towner Act basically bringing in these public health units with nurses. And now, and then at that time, where then you had midwives that would work with some type of autonomy. They saw the mothers they wanted to see, work with them the way they wanted to. Now they had to have a permit. Now, if you wanted to continue, they had to check your bag. Now, you had to adhere to certain restrictions that before you may not have had to have. So where a midwife would have generally also carried her herbs and remedies in her bag, she was told if they found that in her bag, that they would take her permit. Okay, so then, because you know we are smart and creative people, they would have sometimes what they would call trick bags, where like a little slide in up underneath the inside of the bag where they would have their herbs and things like that, because their usage of those plants gave the community comfort, because that's what we were accustomed to. And make no mistake about it, many, if not all of the medicines that we and pharmaceuticals that we use today are based in and come out of the knowledge of plant medicine. So what ends up happening at the public health unit becomes a central space where the Black midwife becomes a community health educator, doing prenatal and postnatal care in these clinics. But make no mistake about it, they were already doing it. They were doing it in their particular client's home, or they were doing it at church, or what have you. It just made it look official to the state. The Shepherd-Towner Act eventually did push out what we know as traditional midwifery, and where you eventually had states where there were hundreds of midwives in these rural areas, to now when you think of a state like Mississippi and we say, well, who's doing home births? And the Mississippi midwives will say there's 6 midwives in the whole state of Mississippi, in a place where it had hundreds of midwives. In the state of Louisiana, we have 3 African-American home birth midwives in a state that had buku midwives. So this pushed out those traditions. And you know how we see when we are able to go into a place that we generally could not go into. So at one time we weren't able to go into those hospitals. So the hospital must be the best thing because they kept us from it, right? So we're going to continue to go in the hospital. And this is not to knock hospital birth, because some need to give birth in the hospital. And midwives don't just help without a hospital birth. They can assist mothers up until they deliver into the hospital as well. But what I'm saying is, in our rush to assimilate into wider society, we threw out some things. We threw out parts of our culture that now we're in this act of trying to grasp it back. Okay, so just a few items of a Virginia midwife, Claudine Smith. She talks about some traditions that she had as being a midwife, and she describes the practice of new mothers staying in her home for several weeks after giving birth, because those of us know that grew up in the old school or had parents and grandparents that was old school, they said you couldn't be outside wide open right after having no baby. You was gonna catch a setback. You know what I'm saying? You was supposed to stay in the house. And so I quote, "When I had all my babies, you stayed in for a month." And a lot of mothers I delivered in the 1950s did that. I made Shirley do that too. But later on, if they stayed in 3 weeks, they do good. Sometimes 5 or 6 days, they'd be in town shopping. But you can tell them and they'll sit there and tell you that's old timey. But people died in old times and they still dying. They usually supposed to go for a checkup after 6 weeks and the baby too. So this gives us, I love reading books like this because it gives us a little dates we can play with. So we know that even in the 1950s, we have folks still dealing with tradition, right? Still, even if they were going to the hospital, some of them were still giving birth at home. And we still had that documented that folks were staying in for at least a month in the 1950s, right? Now we have to ask ourselves, folks nowadays that's young and having children, and I say young, 20s, 30s, 40s, having children, how many have the ability to stay in or is trying to sit in? And if we know that if you get up and you move and you getting all outside, even before COVID, right after you have your baby, you putting a lot of stress on your body, even if it was a good birth. So imagine if you're not having good births. So in the writing and thesis, Birth Behind the Veil by Kalina R. Maxwell, it said the younger generation of midwives, those who underwent training only by the health department, were the least popular among childbearing women. They were not skilled in the traditional healing methods that were important to childbearing African-American women. Women were comforted by the traditional practices and wary of modern medicine. African-American midwives continued to use the traditional methods of healing because they brought comfort to the women they attended. And because of that, they respected the spiritual aspects of their practice. So this is, when we think about the spiritual aspects of that practice, we're talking about things of sometimes they will put a big knife up under the bed to cut the pain, to represent the cutting the pain, the wrapping of the stomachs, the telling the mothers if they had a son to wait for a little while before you cut their hair, the making sure you band the belly and band the mother's belly and band the mother's stomach. So the baby's stomach, and you would use a dollar piece or giving, I know it's not just, you'll have folks down here say it's a Creole tradition, but I know my people from Mississippi and they were not Creole. I found out as I talked to more Black mothers and women who were doing this birth work that the tradition of giving a piece of silver, whether that was a silver dollar to someone who had just given a baby, I see this now as a Black tradition because I've seen this. People say they experienced this in Louisiana and Alabama and Mississippi and places like that. So I know it's a Black tradition to get that piece of silver, that silver dollar after they had that new baby. So things like this, the midwife becomes a bridge to continue traditions that may have been not passed on, but as the pushing of that profession out in its traditional sense really has led to a lot of us grasping at strings to find out, how did we birth? How did we support the mother and baby for better birth outcomes? Even the importance of naming. Those of us that be looking at them census papers and we like, Lord, this ain't the name I knew my mama as, or my grandmother and grandfather and things like that. And when I speak to some people, they say, oh, that those midwives couldn't read or write. I want you to know that the requiring of midwives to fill out birth certificates comes through that Shepherd Act. Okay. We had a tradition that though your baby wasn't named right after you gave birth. I know nowadays we may have a list of names, but that actual requiring midwives to fill out birth certificates with that child's name on it at the time of birth contradicted a tradition we had, which was delaying naming until 7 or 9 days. This would be the time that your elders or your seniors in your family would look at that child and say, oh, who done came back? This, this look like, this uncle, or this, that, and the third. So it wasn't a rush to name your child. Also, because we knew dealing with certain living conditions that sometimes babies didn't live. We don't, sometimes it's not that anybody has done anything wrong, but sometimes there's death, and so giving the mama, the family, the baby time to get grounded and anchored here on this plane, on this physical plane. I know some of y'all may have heard that, a woman right after she done gave birth, she may have one foot in the grave. So this giving them time to anchor themselves into this physical plane that you would wait to name your child. So these birth certificates were kind of a rushing of a thing, because after you would name your child, in 3 months, you may have had a dedication ceremony at the church. So from not only did you say the midwife maybe not spell the name right, when you get on them census papers, was doing census, what's the name?
Excuse me, would you please mute yourself? Okay, go ahead. Sorry.
That's the end of my slides, but I'm gonna go back just to say that this work for me has been very rewarding. My great-great-grandmother, Ida Mae Thompson, was the midwife in Washington County, Mississippi, on my maternal side, and so many of the traditions that, I had my mama, at least for my first child. My mama passed at the age of 49, her telling me, I remember a phrase she told me after I had my baby. She said, okay, you home, because I had my baby in the hospital. I came home. She said, wrap your stomach, make sure you don't get in the bath, because at least in my family, you wasn't supposed to immerse yourself in water after you had your baby. You had to wait a while before you had your baby. And she said, don't touch a broom. I remember her telling me, don't you touch a broom. And that wasn't to be spooky or nothing, but that was to say, you're not supposed to be up and doing work. And now, as somebody who, I've been doing birth work as a doula is a support person that deals with the emotional and physical aspects, not a midwife, since 2012, but I am in my studies as a midwife now. I have a permit for a licensed midwife apprentice. So I'm going through the apprenticeship route. And I'm so happy to have here with us is one of our 3 Black certified professional midwives in the state of Louisiana is on the call, Miss Charlotte Goodall. And she's one of the midwives that I follow, and I give thanks for her because she shares so much about her upbringing in St. Landry Parish and how when she was having babies and what, she talks to me about how you used to be somebody that would stretch the babies. And these type of things we need to know and carry on. So I just give thanks for the opportunity to share some of my studies and research. And thank y'all.
Well, we thank you for this presentation. It was so informative and we learned a lot here. And you sort of brought back some memories to me about the midwife in my area. So what we want to do is open up for any questions. And I know my co-host is there. Would you please stop sharing your screen so we can go into the questions, please? And thank you for that very informative presentation. I do have a question, because a lot of times we have a lot of people who family members was delivered by midwives and they don't have any documentation. I know you run into that a lot of times, right? What would you say to someone who are researching their family history but have no idea when it was documented or if it was documented?
That has been a problem even for myself. Especially with midwifery Mississippi genealogy, and my people coming from Leland and Clarksdale, Mississippi. For instance, like with my husband's genealogy, his people are from Ascension Parish. A lot of them are Catholics. It's a lot of information there. And every time I go and do my family history, I be like, dang, if I did not touch and feel my grandmother, I have no proof that she was ever born. I got a death certificate, but I can't find that she was ever born. And so I would ask and see, do you know if they were part of churches, if they were baptismal records, if they were dedication records? Because that may be something if you can't find the actual birth certificate, because now whatever certificate that they give you and print out may not be exactly what was written at that time. And then in some of those counties, you didn't even have to have a birth certificate. You know, you didn't even have to have that birth certificate. Unfortunately, in this day and age where you have people burning down churches, even some of that history is getting taken away from us, especially those of y'all who know what was happening in St. Landry Parish last year with the burning of two of our very historical older churches. And I just like to cry when that happened, because my first thing I said, all that history in those churches, you know, all that people who was on the usher board, people who was on this, you know, it's all types of history that sometimes we don't think about. We often just think of the Catholic Church, and we don't think of the Baptist churches and things like that with history. So that's what I would say. If you know, the county, the parish, if they were part of a church, if they were part of any type of organizations, women's organizations, men's organizations like Eastern Star or Masonry, if there were lodges, they might have a listing of your family member. But yes, there are a lot of times that those records are not there. And another problem that we're having is people who are related to these midwives. When the midwives die, their children just throw all their stuff away.
Yes, yes.
A lot of them midwives kept a tally of their babies. Even if they didn't spell it correct, they kept a tally, and the family don't know they sitting on gold, and they just
right. We have 2 questions for you. I'm going to go to THC, and then I'm going to come over to Charlotte. So let me just go ahead and ask permission to unmute yourself and get your question in, please.
Hi, everyone.
Hi.
Thank you for calling on me. So I'm a birth doula. I'm also a student midwife. My name is Tiffany Chimaroke Huntsman. I have a lot of family on this call, and I just wanted to also bring up that sometimes if your family had Bibles, sometimes the births are recorded in the Bible, the family Bible. We were able to find a couple of our ancestors who were documented in family Bibles out of St. Landry Parish, and even out of like Amity County, Mississippi. So those are things that if you have access to, like the family Bible in your family, that a lot of times it'll have the babies listed in the back of the Bible, or even in the front of the Bible on those first few pages. One of the things too that I came across was that it doesn't necessarily always have like the babies, like the date. It'll have like the year and the month, but also like I've come across where it'll have the cousins. So it'll have your branch, but it also have, sometimes they documented like the cousins, the relatives that were also born. That's what we came across in ours. But I also just wanted to reiterate too that yes, if you had baptismal records in some of those parish churches, that's also, you know, where I've been able to find some of the records. But I'm enjoying this very much. I'm enjoying this talk very much.
Thank you for joining us. Thank you so much. All right, I'm going to go to Charlotte. Would you please unmute yourself?
Yes, ma'am.
Hi, Charlotte. Hi. What is your question or comment?
Ms. Divine, I would like to know, or anyone else who's on the call, what do you do when you have a family history of mixed heritage, and some documentations are listed where the grandparents may be listed under Caucasian and in one area, and then Black in another area, or using the spelling of the French name versus that of the Americanized name? How do we connect those pieces to know that we are still in the right family?
That's a good question, and I'm going to share you something that I was able to find with my husband's family, they had a oral history that their name is Nicholas. All the Nicholases, if anybody here on Ascension Parish, from Ascension Parish, and your last name Nicholas, you kin to my husband. All y'all is kin. But that this old man Nicholas and Miss Rosa was married, but we knew that they couldn't have been married, you know, in reality, because he was white and she was Black at the time that it was occurred. And so when I started digging into the history, what I ended up finding was that it seemed like all the family stayed in Ascension Parish, but he actually did marry somebody that was also white. And so I followed that history, and it was just long because he was white, you know, with so much information there. But then each time that he had a child, and by the Black woman Rosa, she still listed his name, but she listed it, she spelled it in a different way than his white family spelled his name. And he even got caught one time when the census people came, and they put him as a mulatto, but he's not mulatto, he's white, because we did find his church papers. So I would say I always write down for myself, like I said, I'm a family genealogist. I write down for myself all the different ways that last name have been listed, and I try to stay in the parish and even sometimes follow that person's children if I can. If I see them having like maybe a brother or like something once I'm able to confirm a paper, like when I found his baptismal paper from the Catholic Church, I was able to say, okay, this is confirmed. How can I follow that from here? You know, and then that kind of helped me. But we did have two strands of Nicholases. One is white and one is Black from that one family line. And we even had a situation where he was trying to claim himself as Black or mulatto on a census paper, but he was actually white.
Thank you. Thank you. I want to go over to my co-host, Karran. Would you unmute yourself? I know there's probably a lot of questions coming from the chat room. Is there any questions before I go back to Charlotte coming out of the chat room?
There aren't any questions coming out of the chat room. A comment I'll share later because it's not related to this topic. But I do have a question and also a comment. I just want to thank you for reminding me of so many of the terms I grew up hearing, and so many of the practices, such as putting the knife under the bed to cut the pain, and the silver dollar. And I never knew where all of that came from. And I thought it was just part of some of my New Orleans heritage information, but now you've helped me to understand that comes from the long history of midwifery. And so my question is, when we look at where we are today, it seems that I'm beginning to hear more and more about people having out of hospital births. And so is there a comparison that you are seeing and in current practices of current midwives to some of the historical practices that we know of?
So what we have, and I'll talk about the state of Louisiana, we have right now three birth centers or birth houses in the state where some people are actually birthing there outside of the hospital and then birthing at home. Among, like I said, there's 3 Black midwives in the state of Louisiana. I think every midwife have their different way in which they practice, and you kind of have to feed off of your clients. You may have some people that did not grow up hearing none of that, so it's hard to kind of bridge that that tradition. But if you hear a family, like what I love to ask a family before I even try to talk about plants and herbs, I say, y'all ever take some maglier? Because that's a plant that's common around this area for like coughs and flus. So if they say, oh yeah, I took that was nasty, this, that, and the third, then I know I can say, okay, then why don't you try some ginger for this, or some red raspberry leaf for that, or some peach leaf for this, because they already have a family history of it. So you get that through communication. other traditions that we have as far as like eating okra when you get towards them last few weeks of pregnancy. I know my mama and aunties used to say when you ate that okra, however you had cooked it, leave a little bit of the slime in it because it helped the baby slip out. So that was the things, and you will hear those things sometimes. Sometimes you hear the grandparents or clients say, "Oh, I'm staying in. I ain't gonna catch a setback." Or my mama said, you know, use their everybody didn't use a cloth. Sometimes it was that AC kind of stuff that you would wrap around wrists and wounds to then go ahead and wrap the stomach. So it's just that communication. I feel that some midwives nowadays have to kind of teeter on a line, because as a people, we've considered some things that if it don't come from a doctor, then it's wrong. Even if they come in out of the hospital, some people just want out of hospital birth, not for the culture of it, but just because it's not in the hospital. So you kind of have to, you know, kind of teeter on that and see if there's a connection to where you can share that history.
Thank you. And we have a question coming from Charlotte, and then after Charlotte, Karen, bring that question out to chat room. So Charlotte, please unmute yourself to ask your question or make your comment.
I did. I already asked the question.
Oh, you did? Okay,
Yes.
thank you. I just saw your hand up. All right, Karen, back to you.
Yes, we have a comment from Lynn Dosty from the chat room. She says, "Hello, ladies. I have the original midwife receipt of my grandmother's birth date, dated over 100 years ago by way of New Orleans. Her delivery fee was a fee of $12. Her midwife was Eliza Benton of Bourbon Street."
Awesome. I was just going to ask what was her name, because we have to keep speaking these sisters' names. Oh, and say Eliza Benson.
Benton. Yes.
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 And that was a question that THC was asking. She was asking one of, I think, do we know the names of the Black granny midwives?
We do. I think every, like we just, in my slide, we talked about Miss Claudine, who was in Virginia. I know Georgia has a history of midwives, and we do have their names, not all of them, because some people, like I said, they may have thrown away their family member stuff, and when you ask them, they might be like, "Oh yeah, such and such was a midwife," and they don't think on how important that was. That is, like that was a huge title and crown to wear, that you were a midwife in your community. And it's not today you bring it to their attention and you see their chest kind of puff up a little bit. Like, do you know what that meant for families and after families to entrust themselves to your grandmother or your great-great-grandmother? But every area in the Rural African American Museum here in Opelousas with Mr. Watkins, he has a list of Black midwives that was from like the St. Landry Parish area. Miss Charlotte faces on there as well. And so also Miss the late great Miss Wanda Fontenot, who wrote, she was from Plaisance. She wrote a book called Secret Doctors, which talked about the treaters. And she listed, she was a midwife, they call her Granny Yaya. And she spoke about the tying of the knots and the threads and the herbs and things like that. So we have some people that did write down that history. And I do highly encourage the book Secret Doctors, because very rarely do we get a book about our people doing their herbs and healing work written from somebody who's from the area and who is also Black, you know, because sometimes we have those outside coming in type of work. So I do highly recommend that book.
Well, thank you. And I want to say that Nurturing Our Roots will be joining your chapter, the Louisiana chapter, because I feel like, you know, there's a lot that we can bring to the table as well. So we'll be honored. And certainly, when I think about the midwives, I thought about my brother was sick one time, and Miss Mandy Wheat was one of the midwives in this area. And I have been around St. Helena and Tangier Hole area searching around for information on the midwives. I posted several blogs about midwives in this area. So we would love to bring in St. Helena and Tangier Hole as part of your organization here. And so this is great. Any comments or questions from you, Karran?
No further comments at this time.
From yourself, is there anything you want to add to this?
Oh, I'm absolutely fascinated by this conversation about midwifery. I want to hear, I could just go on and on wanting to hear more about some of the current practices. If someone wanted a midwife to attend to their birth, where would they go to find that?
You can go to midwifecharlotte.com. Midwife Charlotte Goodall, she is a midwife that serves North Iberville Parish, East Baton Rouge, St. Landry, and Lafayette Parish, midwifecharlotte.com. Also, there is a listserv called sistermidwife.com that has a listing of Black midwives from all over the country. And that particular sister, Nicole Deggins, is in New Orleans. She's not doing midwifery work, but she trains labor coaches, labor support people. And she's created this listserv where you can contact doulas. But yes, doulas and midwives. So midwives are working now. Certified nurse midwives are in the hospital. Our certified professional midwives are doing home births and birth center births. And the way in which we deal with clients is still, I know Miss Charlotte to say she picky. She picky. If she wants you to be on your P's and Q's, she gonna talk to you about your nutrition. She gonna talk about you spirit, talk about you in your, are you in your spiritual sense? Are you taking time for yourself? And one of her phrases that she loves to say, okay, you told me what you want, but now tell me what you need. And I love when she says that, that's that good, just solid care. And then I love what we do. I know when we work together is we don't say throw away the doctor. And we say, let's deal with some congruent care, have this circle of care where we can still talk to the doctor, where you can see your doctor for your labs, because if something goes wrong, or if you just feel like, well, I didn't want to change course, we want to make sure you were also getting care by your doctor. And we really feel the doctor working with the home birth midwife, working with a lactation support, where we can find it, where we find that doctors will be supported to us, works very well.
Thank you so much.
And we would definitely like to extend the Zoom sessions to anyone that would like to come on and spend 1 hour talking to my co-host, myself, and people in our audience. We certainly would like to look at having Charlotte on as a guest in the near future. I think that Mother's Day month, May would be a perfect time to talk, to have her on. And if there's anybody else that's listening that's on tonight and you want to share your family history, you want to talk about your family history, please get in contact with us at nurturingourroots@gmail.com. Let me repeat that again, nurturingourroots@gmail.com. And Karran and I answer every email. We will get back to you, but we would love to have you to come on as a guest to share your family history with us. And we just want to say that this platform is designed for ordinary people with extraordinary family stories to share it with us. Not only that, it's a great way to document our family history because it is very important. And Divine, we want to say to you, you have been an outstanding guest. We thank you for that wonderful, educational, informative presentation. And please, you all, we ask you all to like this page, like our Nurturing Our Roots family page, and share it with other people so that we can spread the word about our family history. We have many different topics that we talk about, and all of these topics are very important, and we're trying to educate our young people because I think that most people on tonight know that our young people are not, they're throwing away photographs, they're throwing away the family funeral programs, they're throwing away their history, like you said earlier, Divine, that someone threw all of those papers away and we're throwing our history away. And we want to thank you for being a guest on the show tonight. Is there anything that you want to say, anything that you want to put out there so that people can follow you or follow your organization? The website, whatever it is that you all want to post, please go ahead and do so.
Thank you so much for having me. I do want to make sure that y'all go ahead and follow the African-American Historical and Genealogical Society Louisiana chapter at AAHGSLA, and that's on Facebook and on Instagram. You can find me at Divine Birth Wisdom, divinebirthwisdom.com. And please know we do have a free webinar for the African-American Historical and Genealogical Society Louisiana chapter on the 16th. We're going to have the speaker Teresa Vega. And so please definitely reach out to us.
And we'll be happy to make any announcements. If there's any announcements that you need to have made or your organization, Karran and I will be happy to make those announcements about any of your upcoming events that's coming up. Karran, anything you want to say before we close out with her?
Yes, I just want to share some of the last comments in the chat room from Elle Marie. She says, Antoinette, your work helped me immensely when I first began searching for my family genealogy. Your work on peonage will be in history books someday. And she also said that, have you considered putting your word findings and experience during the poverty tour into a book or full feature documentary? And then the other comment is from KK. She says, hi, everyone. I'm going off topic here. Just want to say thank you. I discovered Antoinette Harrell's channel, Your Story 08, many years ago as a Somali watching the Mississippi videos. And so those are just some comments from the chat room. I just want to thank everybody in the chat room. The chat room is a way that you can share your questions or comments, and then we can share them on air.
Well, thank you. And to answer her question, thank you for following me all those years. Yes, I'm working on something right now. I don't want to tell anybody what I'm working on about the poverty work that we have done in the Mississippi Delta, but yes, there is something in the works. And certainly for everyone that you can watch this show tonight on YouTube. And so when we finish, we will have it up on YouTube because we're live. And if anybody missed Divine's presentation, it is live on YouTube. And please share it with other people because we want to grow in Louisiana. Let people know in Louisiana, we're concerned about our family history and our history here. And it's a great way to share it. So once again, Divine, and you had a very good support system here tonight. I think you probably had over 35 something people that has joined you right here on Zoom. So that's very impressive. And so once again, this is what we're looking for. And if there's anything that any of you all have coming up, you want to share your family history, I want to reiterate that again. Nurturing Our Roots is here to help you bring your voice to the general public. And sometimes family members find other family members because of this show. So nurturingourroots@gmail.com. Very simple. Just get in contact with us because we are looking for people who have the Mississippi roots that come on in and share that history with us too. So thank you, Divine, for sharing your presentation and your knowledge with us tonight.
Thank you so much.
You're quite welcome. And we would like to say to everybody that's there tonight, look, please follow us on Instagram as well, because what we like to do, we want to help the young people research their family history and know the value of their family history. So please follow us on Instagram. I invite you to follow us on Instagram and Nurturing Our Roots. Karran and I, we have different topics. We are in the libraries. We're in different places weekly, sharing our history, researching family history, documenting family history. And this is what this segment of Nurturing Our Roots is all about. All right, Karran, back to you. Any comments?
That is the last comment from the chat room. Well, I will say, Kay said this was eye-opening and inspiring.
Oh, wonderful. And what I would like to share with everyone today, I had an opportunity to go to the AMIT Genealogy Library, and there's a lot of new things that's being donated in the genealogy department. But I want to say to everyone, please consider donating some of your material to universities, to libraries, so that other people can come behind you in that time and find your research. I want to just say that Mandy Wheat, who was the midwife in Tangipahoa Parish, who delivered over 1,000 babies, there is no records of her work. And what a terrible loss. What a terrible, terrible loss. Someone told me to go to the Health Unit Center because they had documented one time they gave her a plaque and it was on the wall, but it's no longer there. So we have to document our work. We have to do that. No one is going to do that for us. It's up to us to do that.
Wow.
And we have a very exciting show coming up next week. You want to talk about that, Karran?
Yes, we're going to have Ms. Angela Walton-Raji, who will be talking about some of her research with Native American ancestry and in its connection to African American ancestry.
And we're so happy for that because I know weekly we always get somebody to call in and want to know something about the ancestry of the Native Americans. And so what we do, we try to bring in those topics every week according to people who want different topics to talk about. So please just know that once again, join us next week at 7 o'clock. And if you have a topic that we have not talked about, please do so. One of the topics I want to talk about is the Black Cowboys.
Oh, that's a great one.
Yeah, that's a great topic because nobody talk about the Black Cowboys and the Black Ropers. You know, we think about cowboys, we don't think about what the local history. And so this is what we want to do. Everyone has a responsibility to talk about the history in your town or in the area where you come from.
Absolutely. I noticed from the Zoom chat, Leslie Russell says that's her people, St. Martin Parish.
Oh, really, really, really. And so just want to give you a little bit. All right, here is our promotional for next week with Angela joining us. And we're really happy to, because she has been doing this work on the Native Americans for a long time. Her book, Black Indians Genealogy Research, was the first book of its kind focused on the unique records that reflecting freedoms found within the Dawes records. So that's very good. We want to, so please join us next week as Angela share her research with us. This is so important. And once again, I know you heard me say it, and I'm gonna say it again. If there's any research that you want to share with us, we would be happy to share that right here on Nurturing Our Roots. Back to you, Karran.
All right. Well, again, thank you to our guest, Divine Bailey Nicholas. It's been wonderful having you. And thank you to everyone in our Zoom chat room and everyone in our chat room on YouTube. Hit it, Antoinette.
Let's remind people to do
Thank you for joining us on Nurturing Our Roots. Please give us a big thumbs up and subscribe to our channel and hit the notification bell so that you won't miss any of our videos.
Yep, let's spread the word. And once again, I will be talking with you, Divine, on tomorrow to see how we can Nurture Our Roots can join your organization so that we can help you all get the word out and we can bring something to the table that can help the history here in Louisiana. And we want to thank everybody in the chat room. We thank all the guests that joined us tonight. It has been a wonderful educational powerhouse tonight. And this is what this is all about. Educating, liberating, uplifting our ancestors. I like this quote that says, it's the past that shapes the present and the present that shapes the future. What do we want the future to look like? At one time, our history wasn't documented. I remember when I first started researching our family history, I was disappointed because there was nothing in the libraries on my family and any other family in the Afro-American community. How did I change that? I changed it by building databases, donating to the library. My collection at the Southeastern Center for Louisiana Studies is the first African-American collection there. And because of that, we have added 3 more collections. Richardson's Funeral Home, extensive funeral programs is one of them. We have donated over 300 funeral programs last month in February to Southeastern for the studies there. So once again, as we research, we must think about how are we going to preserve that history? And the reason I'm saying that, we know that family members pass away and documents and history is thrown away each time. When younger people clean out the house, and sometimes older people, oh, I don't know what they're doing with that stuff. Let's just throw it away. So we have to think about ways of preserving the history too. So I want to say to everyone, thank you for joining us right here on Nurturing Our Roots, the journey where we journey from slavery to freedom.